I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellencies, the many-sided complexities, contradictions, and challenges manifest in the global political economy and system of international relations conspire to demand more than ever a United Nations fit for the purpose of ensuring a multilateral, rules-based international order of peace, security, prosperity, and sustainable development for all of humanity. Indeed, a country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, an exemplar of small island exceptionalism, awash as it is with a historical bundle of debilitating and uplifting legacies and contemporary encumbrances and possibilities of our Caribbean civilization. We see the necessity and desirability of a vibrant and well-functioning United Nations as a matter of the highest priority. We signal this with my presence. The foundation stone, known as the Charter of the United Nations, was shaped and laid by outstanding visionaries and realists to meet the immediate exigencies of the post-war global condition and the foreseeable prospect, thus, of an evolving community of nations to dwell together, if not always in unity, but cooperatively in the pursuit of peace, security, and prosperity. Each generation in humanity's quest for a better life is always faced with inherited and fresh challenges. Accordingly, each generation is both blessed and burdened with a mission of continuity and change as the circumstances admit. At the dawn of the second decade of the 21st century, and in the 75th year of the United Nations' existence, it is justifiable and wise to remind ourselves of the enduring core principles and purposes of the UN, to recommit to them, and sensibly to shape and reform our United Nations in appropriate ways to better execute its mandates in a rapidly changing global order. But what we must not do is to reject or dismantle the foundation stone which the original builders had so carefully put in place and which their esteemed continuators have so painstakingly maintained or fortified. In this regard, St. Vincent and the Grenadines commends Vietnam for spearheading the initiative to hold this debate, and we endorse the presidential statement just adopted. I adopt and call as my own the words of the distinguished Secretary General and the Chair of the Elders. Fundamentally, the Charter of the United Nations codified and developed an efficacious international legal framework to regulate relations between sovereign states in a rational and principled way so as to maintain and promote international order in the interest of all humanity. The international legal framework, by its very nature, is multilateral. It is axiomatic that there cannot be a unilateral United Nations. That is an oxymoron. It must be multilateral. That's its essence. In holding aloft international law of a deepening multilateralism, the founding fathers drew upon right reason and experience and proceeded to codify and elaborate the requisite statutes, rules, settled customs, and norms for authoritative decision-making. Every member of the United Nations knows fully well that which is plainly acceptable or unacceptable within the terms of the Charter and international law. To be sure, there are always spheres of genuine contention and disputatious conversations derived from national interests or technical interpretation. But too often, there is an inclination of too many member states to present what is plainly wrong as right and vice versa. We all know that it is unacceptable for one state or a group of like-minded states to drive a horse and a chariot through the bedrock principles of sovereignty, independence, the equality of states, non-interference and non-intervention, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We all know that it is plainly wrong, similarly, for any state or group of states to be in quest of hegemony or to be engaged in the unilateralist weaponizing of international trade, commerce, finance, or banking. We all know that the treasured right to self-defense cannot be exercised disproportionately or outside the boundaries of international law. We all know, too, that it is unacceptable to support or harbor terrorists and international criminals, to facilitate the spread and use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, or to deny people basic fundamental human rights. Yet in these hallowed walls of our UN, there is a daily diet of justification for that which is plainly wrong or unacceptable. We ought to resolve in this new year to desist from so doing. Mr. President, one of the essential contributions to be made by small states like ours is the tireless advocacy for timeless principles enshrined in international law. With no ideological or geostrategic axis to grind, we consider it our solemn obligation not only to articulate these principles, but to ensure that they are applied consistently and upheld in the international community as universal truths rather than selective, uneven, and unpredictable tools to further hegemonic power or great power ambition. Mr. President, the United Nations Charter also promises us development and economic well-being, which bear upon international peace and security. Accordingly, our best collective efforts require the fixing of underdevelopment, economic insecurity, and vulnerability to external shocks, so as to limit unnecessary conflicts and discord. Similarly, we must acknowledge and act upon the security consequences of climate change, the misuse and abuse of the Earth's resources, inclusive of the seabed, and the weaponizing of outer space. As I conclude, Mr. President, I want to say a few simple, straightforward things. The arrogance of power, however derived, too often imbues human beings and nation states with a sense that restraints upon them are impermissible. This corrupting power is ignoble, which slowly, even imperceptibly, deprives the powerful of much virtue that they possess. Powerlessness, too, can and oftentimes be debilitating. Powerlessness invites cowardice and the opportunism of the meek. It is also a strong stimulus for solidarity. In the end, an absence of virtue, a tendency of ignobility, and irresponsibility, and a rank hypocrisy are clear and present dangers which attend both the powerful and the powerless, though not in equal measure. The metaphoric cards are stacked in favor of the powerful. So to those whom much is given, from them much more is rightly expected. And to the proverbial least among us, let us be steadfast to the core principles and values of our United Nations, and be a conscience in this unruly and chaotic world of much promise. Hopefully, a renewed grace in our United Nations may take us to a better, more peaceful and more secure, more prosperous place for humanity's abode. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gonsalves for his statement.